the 21st day of June 2024. Welcome everybody. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. We have a total of one person on our stream. Way to go, Dana. After a decade, YouTube lets me have a single person on my stream finally. It's truly a blessed day. Our nuclear power plants and nuclear dumps surrounded by farms to make us sick and kill us by design. And the reason we're asking that question is because almost every single nuclear plant on the entire planet is surrounded by farms. And the fuel pools from all the nuclear power plants, of course, are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day. Because when you take the fuel out of the reactor core, put it into the pool, there's no containment. And it's still splitting the same atoms it would to boil water to power a million homes and businesses. So when I started looking up pictures of nuclear power plants, what was really interesting, when you've done aerial shots of them, you start discovering literally almost every one of them, except for a few, are surrounded by farms. And could that be an accident? Could that be just a coincidence? And is that concerning? Well, it's more concerning than the average person can figure out on their own. Excuse me. We didn't get a show in last night. It was 100-degree humidity here. 100-degree, like equal to 100-degree Fahrenheit humidity. And just couldn't get the temperature to come down enough to be able to tolerate it myself, right? So we're making up for it on Friday morning. Friday, where once the show is over, I'll be headed off into the woods to do some research. We're looking for spiders and insects and birds and animals due to the Fukushima radioactive fallout. We're actually documenting an extinction level event. And so why is all these nuclear power plants, nuclear dumps, nuclear fuel processing facilities, weapons production facilities, which release just sickening amount of radiation? And it's hard to appreciate how big that site is, but there's over 100,000 buildings rather on that site. Inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer. So what can eating and consuming massive amounts of it do to your body? It causes incredible diseases. And that they know that the plants and the fruit trees and potatoes and strawberries and everything are magnets for the plants that will suck up that radiation and distribute it in your food cycle. So why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms except for a few when the adverse effects are catastrophic? Well, it's clearly to make you sick. It's clearly to kill you, and particularly your children and the elderly, who are infinitely more vulnerable. So after Fukushima, for instance, they allegedly raised the limits of cesium, but what about the uranium, the plutonium, the americium, the neptunium, the strontiums? These are just degenerate scum. There's no other way to describe the nuclear industry and everybody in it. These are scumbags. These are murderers. These are serial killers. These are monsters. There's simply no other way to describe them. And as little as 50 atoms a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. So it doesn't take you long to bioaccumulate that when your food is produced within 50 or 100 miles of these disease factories. Nuclear power plants are disease factories. And that's established by endless studies and endless presentations. Why are all these disease factories surrounded by farms, as far as you can see? Knowing that nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists, why would you surround a nuclear power plant with farms? Why would you build it in farmland, prime farmland? Of course, there's no other reason, right? It's the best and quickest and simplest way to destroy humanity and the 8 million species on top of that. And to give you like the insanity of how they are, they have a massive nuclear event in Fukushima where there's 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools. And each reactor is equal to 100 Chernobyls because it's pure uranium, pure plutonium. And they're growing food. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. The food was banned by 55 countries and 14 prefectures. That's the prefectures. It's half the country. I've actually had people say, no, Dana, it's not half the country. But when you look at the map, it's half the country. These are big prefectures. And anybody would argue different has an alternative motive. They're growing food in the nuclear wasteland right alongside of millions of one-ton bags. We're talking about billions of pounds a year of rice, like billions in each, in total of these. Like just Fukushima is over 1 billion pounds of rice a year, not counting the other product, and they're shipping it worldwide. You gotta come to your senses. You gotta start making a stand. You gotta start getting educated. You got to start protecting yourself. You can pretend what I'm telling you is not true. And you go ahead and look up Dana Durnford online and ask yourself, why are they demonizing me so many different ways in so many places? And with such vile stuff that they're saying about me. I give you my number, I give you my name every video. I've been here for years and years and years. I've carried out the research expeditions for over a decade. Clearly, I'm not some maniac. I'm just a normal, everyday person trying to do the moral and ethical thing. And my life is destroyed, but I still have a job that needs to be done because nobody else is willing to pick up the baton. So my last video, 100 headlines, 1 hour, 45 minutes, and 39 seconds. I actually gained 22 seconds 12 hours later. Like every video will get changed after 12 hours. And so they're putting software in my videos. So especially if you can watch the videos within 12 hours. I had 2 views. So 1 minute later I had 2 views. But I had 35 likes on my video. Every other YouTuber would have got at least 35 views. So when my video's over, I'm very fortunate if I get 1 or 2 views. These are live shows that last an hour and 40 to 2 hours minutes or longer. And so now the video 12 hours later, that one is 15 hours. But at the 12-hour mark, my video gets longer or shorter even. In this case, I got an extra 22 seconds. It went from an hour and 45 minutes, 39 seconds, to an hour and 46 minutes and 1 second. And the poll that night was, are journalists degenerates for claiming that Chernobyl, which is a single reactor, graphite reactor, a brand new one, is worse than 4 large plutonium nuclear meltdowns in Fukushima? That also had 8 fuel pools with around 8 reactor cores in each fuel pool. That's all gone also. You better start fighting back. If you want a future, if you want your children to have a future, you want your loved ones to have a future, if you want to see birds in the near future, you got to get busy. You need to get educated, protect yourself, and preferably educate your loved ones. And the information is endless. We have endless information on this site. Over 700 of these long presentations. There's around 100 of the short, less than 1 minute videos. There's no excuse for not getting educated. I've worked like a dog for over a decade straight. Pro-nuclear energy bill passes Congress, now waits for Biden's approval. Ain't that interesting, that pro-nuclear energy bill? As the U.S. continues to roll out the major climate-related legislation, so they're conflating these together as if they have... But radiation is anthropogenic climate change. It's pulsing energy every second for millions of years. It never goes away, and we've been producing it for 80 years. Imagine producing something for 80 years that never goes away, and it pulses energy every second. And then pretending that that doesn't have any adverse impact upon the ecosystem or the environment. I call it stupid. And it passed legislation votes with 88 to 2 votes. 88. As the most resource intensive, it's strictly about weapons, right? But it's the most resource intensive industry on the planet. Every nuclear power plant needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants just to function. The proposed accelerating deployment of Advanced Nuclear for Clean Energy Act. Advanced Nuclear for Clean Energy. So now they literally, on the bills, are claiming that nuclear is clean energy. And the bill is meant to make it almost impossible for the average person to rationalize. The average person just takes it for what they see, right? When you pick up 30 million one-ton bags in just 3% of the land after a nuclear accident of radiation that you don't know what to do with on top of that, and you're going to call that clean or has some redeeming qualities, you're a monster, literally a monster. Next generation reactor technology. The next generation so-called reactor technology actually doesn't exist. There is no next generation. There's no licensing. There's no applications into the regulatory agencies. It's so far from fruition, even if they were to work diligently at it, which they're not, you're talking about 2, 3, 4 decades down the road for it to come to fruition because of the applications, because you have to build test reactors, they got to get all the kinks out of it, they have to redesign it, and the list goes very long. It's also expected to cut regulatory costs for companies, which is a very dangerous precedence when you're cutting regulatory demands, seeking to license nuclear reactor. And you can do all of this. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. They're not going to come up with any reactors. And this is the only reason they're doing this in desperation, that they're going to come up with reactors, but it's simply never going to happen. 90% of the money is stolen through administration right away. It's not always been that way. That's why nuclear is so prohibitively expensive. Potentially resolving the decade-old problems of growing costs and permit requirements. No, it just means there's more money to steal. This will be in addition to an incentives to further encourage companies to revive former fossil fuel generating sites into nuclear sites that they're now calling clean energy facilities. And I've never seen a legislation this strong before, for that kind of propaganda. And Kratzy Electric in 2022, which is geothermal, came out and said that they're going to repurpose gas, oil, coal, and nuclear plants into geothermal plants, which is clean energy, not nuclear. Nuclear can't be clean energy. But what you are seeing, this posturing, this framing of the narratives, is these are drowning people. This is a drowning industry, and it'll drag down everything with it in its desperation, right? Encourage companies to revive former fossil fuel generation sites into clean energy facilities. The $370 billion, which is enough money, of course, to solve the food crisis worldwide, a couple of times over, actually. Climate investment pledge. That's enough to get rid of world hunger a couple of times over. Wasted on a disease factor known as nuclear. This headline really cracks me up. The story's been going around for years now. Now they're saying that this so-called robot at Fukushima, this is not even a robot. It's a fishing rod basically, with a gripper on the end of it that can pick up maybe a gram at a time. And we estimated that if they were to actually use this to decommission the sites, it would take them around 666 years or something. Simpler system allied to recover melted fuel. It couldn't be further from the truth. Simpler system to recover melted fuel at Fukushima plant. But what they're saying is it's going to decommission the plant. That this is, again, simply completely out of context. And anything with electronics in it, the minute it goes near the nuclear waste, dies. And clearly these contraptions that took how many millions of dollars to make a fishing rod is full of unshielded electronics. It can't work in that environment. And they knew this 70 years ago. They knew this 60 years ago. They knew this 50 years ago. They knew this 30 years ago. They knew this 20 years ago. They knew it 10 years ago. They knew it 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 years ago. They knew it now. And they know this doesn't work. They know this is pointless. Look at the stupidness. And this gets all the media attention. And you're not ashamed to be a human after seeing this. And like the nuclear industry is supposed to be technically proficient, right? 80 years, you get 80 years to build a robot. 80 years. They have all kinds of accidents, all kinds of events, all kinds of idiot machines that they've done over the years. And they still haven't come up with a solution. And their solution is a fishing rod. And again, you see the stupidest pictures imaginable. This is literally one of the stupidest pictures conceivable. We've seen this multiple times. It has no basis in reality. A specialized device resembling a fishing rod will be used to hook tiny bits of melted nuclear fuel debris from one of the 3 damaged reactors. And they're talking about reactor 2. And they figure by October they'll have, after they spend multi-millions and millions and millions of dollars they got to locate it for this, they'll go ahead and start because then they'll need more money. It was shown to reporters on May the 28th. It's regarded as the trickiest phase of the decommissioning work. It's not like we don't have any experience in 80 years with this problem, right? Because the wrecked facility is still plagued by extremely high levels of radioactive radiation. These are lethal doses, just walking past these blown up reactors, these melted reactors. TEPCO plans to remove a few grams of the melted nuclear fuel from the number 2 reactor. Well, the reactor number 2 went China syndrome. It actually liquefied and burnt straight down into the earth. You're not removing anything from any of the 4 reactors because they don't exist at Fukushima. And TEPCO, of course, which was nationalized by the Japanese government, shouldn't exist. So, this is the reason the story is there. TEPCO plans to remove a few grams of the melted nuclear fuel from the number 2 reactor because the radiation levels there are relatively low, which is the furthest thing from the truth. The fuel pools above reactor 2, with around 8 reactor cores melted down. There is no low levels at reactor 2. Reactor 2 liquefied uranium. It burns at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. It ionizes and radiates, atomizes and aerosols everything it comes in proximity to, not just contact, but proximity to, because of the enormous temperatures. There is no fuel pools in reactor 2. There is no reactor cores. They're gone. What that didn't burn off is gone China syndrome. And it's not low-level radiation. So the story and the fishing rod is all about propaganda, setting the stage for the next amount of propaganda they already have. Designed like a fishing pole, that 66-foot long, 22-meter long device was inserted into a model of the pedestal to support the reactor's pressure vessels. Like, to call these people just disgusting parasites is being nice. You're being polite. That's what their family calls them, I'm sure. The aim was to ascertain whether pebbles representing fuel debris could be grasped with the claw-like arm. So you built it, you spent millions of dollars, and now you're gonna see if you can pick up pebbles. It's hard to imagine that people this stupid actually exist. And suggesting there's only 880 tons of fuel debris left in the number 1 and 2, or estimated to remain in the number 1 to number 3 reactors, 1, 2, and 3. What do you think remains in the reactors that were at the top of this building? What you're looking at is 1/4 of the buildings left. The other 3/4 of the buildings are gone. These were 19-story, 65-meter, 190-foot buildings. There is no reactor cores. There is no fuel. There is no fuel pools left at these buildings. And they're also saying that this building didn't have any adverse side effects whatsoever. Nothing got out of reactor 4. Nothing got out of reactor 3. This is an industry that, in all honesty, let's keep going. A robotic arm developed for the purpose later turned out to lack a sufficient level of precision, which they spent something like $30 million on. Strictly about stealing money, because it's an experiment, the taxpayers pay for it. It's just another way of making sure the country has no future. And that seems to be the consensus, is what everything in nuclear does, is to make sure the country has no future. TEPCO now plans to gingerly begin the procedure with a simple rod-style system and deploy the robotic arm at a subsequent stage. Like, the minute that any of these comes in contact with the nuclear fuel, you can never get near it again. And if there's any electronics, it dies. But you can never get near it again. So if you do pick up something and put it somewhere, nothing can get near it. A single gram of this is a lethal dose just walking past it. Nuclear Energy Agency never takes a break. Light water, small, medium, and modular reactors. The small, medium, and modular reactors don't exist. You can't discuss challenges and opportunities for something that doesn't exist. You don't even have applications into the regulatory agencies for the licensing, let alone licenses. But look at the people that are going to be making bags of money, doing nothing. And I really do. I always like these pictures so I can just look at the worthless humans that humanity has managed to compile. These are worthless humans. And trust me, they think they're special. They're compartmentalized. But these are actually worthless. They look like humans, but they're not. I don't think they are humans. They don't have any of the attributes. We never see the attributes. The Nuclear Energy Agency, of course, which its job is to promote nuclear, which is a disease factory. Organizing the first brainstorming workshop dedicated to light water, small, medium, and modular reactors on the 10th and 11th of June, held in a hybrid format in Ankara and Turkey. The event brought together regulators, designers, researchers to tackle current challenges and regulatory expectations surrounding light water, small modular reactor designs. There's almost 100 companies And they all got their own small modular reactor design. None of them got applications into the regulatory agency. None of them knows what the hell they're doing. They just know it's easy money, right? They'll throw gobs of money at these companies. These are insiders. It's cushy money for their children. The children don't have to come up with any kind of solutions. This is kickbacks for the evilness that they done, their parents done. This initiative, supported by the Nuclear Energy Agency, aims to address the increasing demand for innovative nuclear technologies. You know, with the way they're destroying Earth, and the small modular reactors could be so that they can go down into their proverbial tunnels and live down there for 100 years or something, because the planet will be uninhabitable for at least that long. That could be why they're desperately trying to come up with this solution. But it's not for no noble reasons. How a nuclear bill became Congress' first big energy win. E&E News. Look at that at the top of the page, folks. By Political. And this is not, E&E News is not, was an anti-nuclear website that went down a few years back, right? But using that name, they're hoping that people that do go looking up the original E&E News will end up at this disease factory known as Political. The support was resounding. The sweeping nuclear energy bill, known as the Vance Act, sailed through the Senate as part of the S-870, the Fire and Safety Act. They attached it to the Fire Grants and Safety Acts. They got 390 votes in Congress, or in the House, rather. And he says among the few energy sources that produces zero emissions. But what are you talking about? The minute you take it out of the... Like, just to boil the water, you need 2 gas, oil, and coal plants to pump 1 million gallons a minute, plus to run the whole site. You can't run the site on nuclear. It has to run on external power. And this narrative for the last 6 or 7 years in particular has gotten stronger each year, where they keep insisting more and more and more. And now you can't have a sentence with nuclear where you typically don't see the word zero emissions, or a story about nuclear where you're not going to see zero emissions multiple times. When you take the fuel out of the reactor, the emissions are perpetual. It's splitting atoms, and everything on the planet with replicating cells has no autoimmune trigger to defend against it for forever. So everything is under siege for the rest of your life. And to call it zero emission, everybody that does that should be arrested. This is completely barbaric to suggest a nuclear has the most lethal emissions because it's splitting atoms forever. It never stops splitting. That's why nuclear waste is dangerous, because it's still splitting atoms, not because it's such an evil industry, isn't it? And calling it carbon-free, it's the most resource-intensive industry in human history. Let me give you a couple of examples. Well, it's a despicable industry. Like, it's truly... these people are insane, is the only way to describe the people. So every nuclear power plant needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to them. If you look at a nuclear site, they're massive. They can't run on their own energy. Here's my favorite one. Let me see if I can find a picture that does it justice. To call this industry is insane is just being polite. It's worse than insane. So how much energy do you think it takes to build a site to power that whole process? There's enough cement. This is Hinkley Point in the United Kingdom. And in the background, what do you see as far as you can see is farms. But just look at the enormity of, it's hard to comprehend how big these sites actually are, even with these pictures. It's still really difficult for the average person to appreciate what we're talking about. And this site, when it's finally finished, it's like it needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants, right? It needs 2 of these to build this site, to provide energy to it. It also needs it to run the site for its lifetime, and then it needs 2 power plants, external power plants, to decommission it for 50 years. And then once you take the first fuel out of the reactor cores and put it in the fuel pools, those farms are going to be lethal to everybody. Not lethal right away, but lethal in the long term. And there's endless diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses that will manifest from consuming this. While geothermal and hydropower simply provides clean, consistent power, they comprise a small fraction, about 6%. And so nuclear provides 20% of the country, United States, for instance. Geothermal and hydro provide 6%. But that 6% is only about 40% of 1%. It's 0.40 of 1% of the money that they spent on nuclear. If you spent the same money as nuclear as you do on geothermal, for instance, like if you took the money, the $370 billion for the Clean Energy Act, and you spent it on geothermal, that's enough geothermal for the entire United States. One and done, right? But this $370 billion is on top of $1 trillion for the military, for the nuclear weapons, is on top of endless incentives that they already have in place. And look at these people. They pretend they're humans, but when will they act like it, I wonder? The Advanced Act sailed through the Senate as part of the Fire and Safety Act. What a dirty, despicable, and what a gouging they're doing to the country. What an insidious a boost for carbon-free energy. A one-way ticket to the global nuclear energy dominance, all in one neat package. But it doesn't, like we notice from decades that you can throw, and you do, endless money at this industry. It doesn't produce anything. It just steals it. And it stops you from coming up with solutions. Really, the nuclear industry is the worst thing that can happen to a country or to a planet. And nuclear energy can't produce zero emissions. It's absurd to suggest it can. But that's their hook, right? They don't have any other redeeming qualities, or they don't have a redeeming quality to call upon, and so they made one up that produces zero emissions. And that's their almighty reason for it. Oh, it's zero emissions. But because it doesn't have any qualities whatsoever, they made that one up. Why, where the world plans to test nuclear weapons next? This is the New York Times, I believe it was. So anything from the New York Times you can expect to be just rejected humans. They're subhumans, and their job is to manipulate you into doing whatever the powers, the influence corporations, which is the military-industrial complex, wants done. A nuclear weapon doesn't need to be used in war to have a lasting impact. And so they need to tell you some truths in order to get you over. This particular story, they start to go down the road of reality, and then they veer off into the world of propaganda again immediately. But let's just, and like we're killing it tonight. Look at this, holy shit, we got 10 people in our show. 10 people. On a show I've been doing for over a decade, 5 days a week, if I'm not out researching. Are nuclear power plants and nuclear dumps surrounded by farms to make us sick and kill us by designs? 10 viewers. 10 people on my show. That I work like a dog for 5 days a week. if I was wrapping shit on a stick, there'd be 30, 40, 50,000 people here yucking it up as soon as I went live, right? And by now there'd be 50,000 on the show, right? But when you point a finger at evil, evil just loses his minds. The majority of the pro-nuclear right now are gone in their closets and turned the lights off telling my show is over. More than 2,000 such weapons were tested during the 20th century. Yeah, well, the Nagasaki bomb, let's use that as a measuring stick, like a 15 kiloton, right? So, Castle Bravo was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki's. It was just a single bomb. So when you say 2,000 weapons, some of these weapons are equal to 1,000 Nagasaki bombs. And that was a bomb. Let's make no mistake about that. Look at the damage. Go look at pictures of it, and you'll agree with me that that's definitely a bomb. It's definitely a nuclear bomb. The Soviet Union's, which is one of them, the 2,000 they're talking about, was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. The numbers, don't quote me on it, but it was over 35,000 Nagasaki bombs worth of weapons went off. Is that not a nuclear war? Is 35,000 Nagasaki bombs a nuclear war? Is that a nuclear war? And if it's done over decades, isn't that decades of nuclear war? Isn't that decades of radioactive fallout? Is the radioactive fallout the same in a nuclear test as it is in a nuclear war? Is it the same bomb? Is it the same radioactive fallout? An American government, the Russians, the Pakistanis, the Indians, the Chinese, none of them has cleaned up the consequences of the testings. Like if you, and so this was about demonized, this whole story is about demonizing China. As W.J. Hennigan detailed in his latest For the Times opinions, so when a story doesn't get a lot of traction, then they'll come out and a lot of people will direct people to that story to try to give us some traction. That's all you're seeing. You see, none of the nations have conducted an underground nuclear test since they all signed the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, except for France, of course, and India and Pakistan. And all underground nuclear testing, by the way, was vented into the ecosystem. And every nuclear country is upgrading their nuclear facilities. And so this story was strictly about demonizing China. And China will do the same stories demonizing America. And that'll justify the billions or trillions of dollars they're going to spend on their weapons. That's all the story is about. The Advance Act, legislation crucial for a U.S. nuclear renaissance, clears Congress, and here's a detailed breakdown. Here's a detailed breakdown. According to the think tank, the Breakthrough Institute, which created by Ted, I can't remember his name, Ted and Michael Schellenberger, two pro-nuclear lobbying groups. So the regulatory body does not unnecessarily limit the use of nuclear energy or the benefits it could provide. And now the Breakthrough Institute, this guy here, last year they got $19 million donation. $19 million. Same as the year before. $19 million. And all he does is write stories and come out and support nuclear. $19 million. There's big money, see, in being pro-nuclear degenerates, right? And that's Ted right there, the founder and executive director of the Breakthrough Institute. Well, he's one of the founders. Michael Schellenberger is the other founder. The Advance Act, however, tackles several other notable aspects, including measures to establish a global leadership and competitiveness in the sector. Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, Tid? There is no nuclear renaissance. Let me show it to you. You tell me if I'm right or you tell me if I'm wrong. There is no nuclear renaissance. To say there's a nuclear renaissance is the biggest misdirect conceivable. I wish I could have done the show last night, but it was just too hot for me. And today, when the show is over, I got to get out in the woods and do some research, because yesterday was just too hot for me. I did go out yesterday looking for insects, and never found very many at all. Nuclear goes backwards again. This is January 21st, 2024, so that is this year. This is a little over 5 months ago. And what they done was they looked at 2023. So in 2023, nuclear power suffered a net loss of 1.7 gigawatt capacity, which is equal to 2 large nuclear power plants going offline. So they never gained any extra. Whereas renewable capacity additions amounted to a record 507 gigawatts. So 507 gigawatts is equal to almost 600 large nuclear power plants coming online in 12 months. The last reactors they built in America took over 14 years and 4 times the budget, which, of course, that's the only way they can build it is tell you it's going to be built in a short time for a tiny budget. And once you got it started, then they just keep destroying your ability to have a future by liquidating your country's assets to support these disease factories, which are going to destroy the health of everybody eventually. As soon as you take the fuel out of the reactor cores and put it in the pools, it's hemorrhaging radiation forever, because they're splitting atoms, right? So how can Ted, the notorious monster, Ted, right there, Breakthrough Institute, suggest there's a nuclear renaissance when clearly on the 21st of January of this year, when you go look at last year, nuclear went backwards and renewables flatlined. And we're not talking about geothermal. Why wouldn't you do geothermal? Why would you even look at nuclear when you have geothermal everywhere? Which is, by the way, 50% higher, double the capacity of 2022. And they're expecting the same thing next year and the same thing the year after. And like in 2020, they estimated by 2026, new renewables would equal around 4,800 gigawatts, which is equal to 5,500 large nuclear reactors coming online in just 6 years. And so, because of the staged war in Ukraine and Russia, this was a staged war. This was meant to drive commodities through the roof. Renewables still, despite the fact that their prices were exorbitant for the last number of years because of the staged war in Ukraine and Russia, they still flatlined nuclear. Nuclear's getting all this money again, and it's just going to steal everything, and there's going to be they're going to do it again next year and the year after and the year after, to try to stop renewable, or just get what they can before renewable takes over. Your enemy is nuclear, period, clearly. And look at this, the crazies in Australia. Now, it's illegal for Australia to have nuclear reactors. That's legislation. That's the legislation. So we've been rolling for 45 minutes. How many people we got on the show now? I wonder. 10 people on the show. We're just killing it. Nobody can find the show. 13 likes. Nobody can find the show even long enough to give me a thumbs up, eh? Because I'm not allowed to have shows in the daytime. My shows have to be at night in order to get 15 people in my show. So what's Australia talking about? Nuclear energy is banned in Australia first off. So having nuclear would be very difficult, right? Now Peter Dutton is saying that he can have small modular reactors in a few years. That's crazy to suggest it. The applications are not even into the regulatory agencies yet, let alone licenses. How are you going to build it? How does that work? He announced that if elected, the opposition planned to build 7 nuclear reactors on the site of retired coal-fired plants. And so this is really interesting. Now this narrative we've seen showing up quite a bit since Quasi-Electric, which is a company that aims to power the world for millions of years by digging the deepest holes ever. It's an MIT spin-out that's going to use X-rays to melt the rocks, and it's going to repurpose coal and gas plants into deep geothermal wells. It's going to repurpose coal and since that story broke, the nuclear industry was like, we're going to make coal and gas nuclear because nuclear is clean, right? And they only done that because Quasi-Electric scared the shit out of them. And in desperation, because you can't come up with anything original, they stole that narrative. But it's clear nuclear can't exist. They're too busy stealing the resources. 90% of the money goes into administration. Like all the super funds sites out there, they get enough money right away to clean up the site. 90% of the money gets stolen. So there's no way to finish the job. And that's on purpose. They don't want to finish the jobs. The idea of pollution is to make you sick and your children sick and all the species disappear. These are nihilists. They want to exterminate the planet, and they're going to win. There's no maybes about it. But we have an obligation to try to survive and to try to make sure there's a future and to try to hold them accountable. But make no mistake, what they're doing is an extinction event. They've been doing it for 80 years. We can't put that genie back in the bottle. This is an extinction event. I don't I do a lot of work and we get 10 people in the show, and that doesn't bother me. I'm going to do the show anyway if there's nobody here. And bless everybody that does show up. But I'm going to do the show anyway because I don't want the world to look back and say nobody tried. Because at least they can say we tried, right? And we've done a damn good job of informing the population. The only problem was the industry was so evil. It can't exist. It exists only by being evil. It can't exist. It can't coast and be evil. It has to be evil 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the people in the industry, they're interesting because we've been doing this for a very long time. And the one consensus we can really truly say is that they're not like humans. They don't have the typical emotions of a human. And they truly despise the insects and the birds and the whales and the puppies. They despise them. They have the utmost contempt for the pollinators. They're doing everything they can so they don't get caught doing it on top of that to poison this entire ecosystem permanently. So there is no life in the future. And that's why they want the small modular reactors, so when they're living in their holes in the ground, they'll have their power supply and their illusional life. And this is caused by the inbreeding in the nuclear industry. Generations of these degenerates inbreeding, and their children now are in positions of power, and they don't know what the human experience is. They only know that their parents tried to exterminate everything, and their parents had tried to exterminate everything, and their parents, and so they feel, or not feel, but that is what they know. They think that's the way it's supposed to be. They don't, if they see a puppy, they would kick it as quicker than a child could pet it. And then quasi-electric intends to up the ante by vaporizing enough rock to create the world's deepest holes and capture geothermal energy on a scale large enough to meet the human energy needs for millions of years. So excluding gas, they're going to get rid of oil, going to get rid of nuclear, and going to get rid of coal and use geothermal, which is the right moral and ethical thing to be doing. And then the degenerate nuclear industry, the only way they can exist is if they steal that narrative and trick people into believing that that is their gold, when clearly that's not their gold. They're going to use beams to vaporize the rocks. There's many other ways to do this, by the way. And they're going to hit temperatures of like almost 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, which is hotter than nuclear, hotter than gas, hotter than coal, hotter than oil. And by 2026, they will have this conquered. And then and there's another company out there, and the aim of the company is repurposing coal and natural gas and oil plants with this technology, which is obsolete technology, all off-the-shelf technology. They spent, almost 100 years trying to crack the fusion, for instance. They don't spend any time working on geothermal. These companies, if they don't show up, there is no universities working on geothermal. Because geothermal, the minute that geothermal makes it into the lexicon, the narrative worldwide, is the minute that everything else falls apart and that we actually have a future. And here we see all these stupid stories. Sellafield nuclear waste site pleads guilty to IT security breach. Oh, that was nice of him. He pleaded guilty. Because they're not even going to get a slap on the wrist. They can't go to jail. They're a corporation. They can't get a criminal record. It's a corporation. There's no incentive not to be evil. See? So here's Sellafield. And that picture doesn't do it justice because there's 1,000 buildings on that site. 1,000 buildings. So think of a town with 1,000 houses in it. It's a big town, right? And all of this is hemorrhaging radiation. This is a nuclear disease factory in overdrive. And look at the farmland. The farmland butts up against the facilities, right? When you download pictures, you start realizing the farmlands are all butted right up to the nuclear disease factory itself. And it's not an accident. This is why we got a poll tonight asking that question. Are nuclear power plants nuclear dumps surrounded by farms to make us sick and kill us by design? Holy shit, I got 12 people on my show? I know I've only been doing it for a decade. I probably don't deserve to have that many people, but 12 people in one time? I've never seen the likes of that before. That's crazy. So why are the nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? They're meant to make you sick and kill you. This is a death cult. That's the only way to describe the nuclear industry. And a lot of people in the nuclear industry are definitely compartmentalized, but that doesn't make it any less evil. Serbia is going to commission the first study of the possibility of building a nuclear power plant. As far as I know, Serbia, same as Australia, legislation says they can't have a nuclear power plant. So like Australia, the nuclear industry has wormed its way into the country. Worldwide small modular reactor technology trends. Like, what are you talking about? There is no trends. There is no small modular reactors. Inner data. Small modular reactors represent an innovative approach to nuclear fission technology, and they offer power capacities of up to 400 megawatts. That's a large nuclear reactor. That's not a small one. There's lots of large nuclear reactors out there. That's their output is 400 megawatts. It's so stupid. And then they call it a small modular reactor. But it's all they're talking about, because they don't have licenses or applications in for the license. They don't have actual fucking designs in. So now they're going to make a large reactor and call it a small modular reactor because that's the only thing that they can actually do. Makes sense, of course, because stupid doesn't leave far from its nest, does it? or around a third of the conventional ones. It's not a third of a conventional. How many reactors out there are 1,200 megawatts? There is a couple, maybe two or something like that. The majority of them are less than a gigawatt. So to suggest that the majority of them, 1.2 gigawatts, is completely dishonest. In fact, the majority of them are about 0.89 gigawatts. So less than a gigawatt. Current small modular reactor deployments. There is no deployment. They don't exist. Nobody has an application or a license. Nobody's ever built one. And the ones that they're equating as a small modular reactors, like the academic, the Russian barge, that's a 10-story barge. And it's similar underneath. The reactor is all underwater, so it's a huge, it's massive. It's 600 feet by 300 feet. 600 feet long, 300 feet wide. It's 10 stories tall. And people are out there in order desperation to get small modular reactors from street creds. They're calling it a small modular reactor. And in 5 to 15 megawatts for off-grid needs such as isolated communities, military and defense use. Like, why would you do it military and defense? Because if they get attacked, you're going to blow up a nuclear reactor. So why would you give them one? And why would you put nuclear reactors in small isolated communities? Why would you even dream that? With no way to, like, you're isolated. So if you have an accident, there's no way for them to evacuate. If you have an accident, there's no way to mitigate it. You have to bring in all the resources to try to deal with any kind of an accident. And why would you trust the military with a nuclear reactor? They have no incentive not to be evil because their job is to be evil. How is radioactive nuclear waste managed? You like this one? They can be compacted and incinerated. Not too hard to know this is a United Kingdom, a UK story, is it? They can be compacted and incinerated. You can't destroy nuclear waste by incinerating it. You just liberate the isotopes back into the ecosystem. And that narrative only showed up last year, right? Where they brought in some new graduates from school, and they said, well, let's rewrite the whole thing. And we'll put 97% of the nuclear waste that would normally be put in a repository, some type of holding place, we can recycle. And then the people that know that's incredibly evil but are now retired are like, yeah, let them do whatever they want. We don't care. You think Wade Allison cares? You think Kathleen Higley cares? Currently, spent fuel is stored temporarily in spent fuel pools. And spent fuel pools have no containment. You're splitting atoms. It's boiling off about 120,000 liters a day. And all of these disease factories are surrounded by farms. What do you think happens? You eat the food, your children get sick, and every other day you got to take them to the doctor or the hospital or a specialist. Nuclear engineer dismisses Peter Dutton's Australian claim the small modular reactors could be commercially viable soon. So Dutton's claiming that small modular reactors were going to resolve it. So if he's elected, he'll solve your energy problem by using small modular reactors which don't exist. Iran expands its nuclear capabilities. We hear this fear-mongering. Look at the disgusting Rafael Grossi, the despicable, maniacal, sadistic Rafael Grossi with the International Atomic Energy Agency. One of the worst humans conceivable. One of the most sadistic, subhuman. And I can guarantee you, if you've done his DNA, that's not a human. I don't know what the fuck it is, but it ain't a human. The Fordo enrichment plant, Iran's most heavily protected nuclear facility, is undergoing a major expansion that could triple the site's that could, maybe, perhaps, who knows, we're not sure. But let's put that out there because it looks good for Israel, right? Allowing Iran to potentially make several bombs worth of nuclear fuel every month. Potentially, maybe, perhaps, who knows. It's okay for everybody else to do it, but Iran can't do it. Iran's not allowed to protect themselves. And the only way you can protect yourself from the nuclear industry is get nuclear weapons. Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons. Look what happened to them. They don't even exist anymore, like Palestine. Tehran formally notified the International Atomic Energy Agency, the watchdog of the construction. But their take, our take, is that they're doing it for nefarious purposes, right? See that? And Tehran's proxies are actively engaged in hostilities with Israel. Israel has, the Americans in Israel and the United Kingdom has 49 military bases on Iran's border for decades, carrying out electronic warfare. Each of these military bases, by the way, are chemical, biological, nuclear weapons. Iran hasn't attacked anybody. Israel attacked Iran's and killed their ambassadors in their embassies, and they shot 300 weapons back at them. And if they wanted to, they could have took out the Domoa nuclear site, and they could have caused a nuclear meltdown in Israel if they wanted to. Israel couldn't do nothing about it. They spanked them for the first time. All Israel's ever done is had major Western media, because Israel's a coward, had the Western media attack Iran constantly and demonize them and paint them as a boogeyman to justify a draconian and land, sea, and air embargoes against the country. If anything, Israel should have 100% land, sea, and air embargoes against them. They really are just nothing but a trouble for the entire planet. Demolition of Fort Greely's old nuclear plant to begin this year, 50 years later. 50 years later. Oh, many of the nuclear power components are encased in concrete in the building that still stands at Fort Greely. So they didn't decommission it. They let it sit there for 50 years, and all they done was poured cement into the radioactive area. Way to go, stupid nuclear. You're so brilliant. You're such a treasure to humanity and the 8 million species, you despicable maggot. Nuclear terrorism risk are high, researchers warn. Over the past few decades, U.S. have employed a multifaceted approach to prevent nuclear terrorism. What the fuck are you talking about? Almost every nuclear power plant in the United States is surrounded by farms. If that's not nuclear terrorism, what the fuck is? Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram. And they're only acknowledged in cesium, of course, because that's what scumbags do. And the nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. All of them. Like it's poison food. And the poison affects immediately. Once you get the radiation in your body attacks with white blood cells for the rest of your life immediately. The cause and effect are immediate. Are nuclear power plants and nuclear dumps surrounded by farms to make us sick and kill us by design? Look at that, 14 likes. 14! And 13 viewers, bless your hearts, but 13 on a show I've been doing for over a decade. So they bring out $370 billion for nuclear industry, and the only couple of people left on the planet trying to have a conversation has to be silenced because they can't exist with the truth, see? Not even one person there that's saying the truth. The industry can't survive. They're intimidated. Fight against nuclear waste may head to the Supreme Court. So what if it does? You're not going to win that battle. The nuclear industry is so completely out of control for so many generations that evil is the only thing that makes sense. Everything else is permanently vanished, vanquished to the Ethernet, right? The fight to keep the high-level nuclear waste at a Permian basin. Well, they'll just put it in your community, if not. A fight to prevent high-level radioactive waste at a site near Andrews may be headed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which means you're not going to win that one. Waste control specialists and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission have appealed to the nation's highest court last year's ruling from the U.S. Fifth Circuit of Court of Appeals that vacated the license to receive, possess, and transfer and store up to 5,000 metric tons of spent fuel. 5,000 metric tons. Yeah, but the Americans are standard, not metric. So why are they using metric? Well, they only use it for nuclear because they can put more in it, see? And so they've been rejected. It's been rejected everywhere that they tried it, right? The governors of Texas opposes it. The Texas legislators oppose it. The New Mexico opposes it. The Fifth Circuit opposes it. Rolls-Royce small modular reactor supply chain program is launched. More than 130 delegates, with hundreds more joining virtually, attended the Rolls-Royce small modular reactor. And the small modular reactor is a massive reactor. It has nothing to do in the context of a small modular reactor. Representatives from small, medium, and large organizations. Yeah, well, that's their bread, right? They all support each other, but they don't need to come up with a solution. They don't need to produce anything. They just need to go take the money and enjoy the free vacation each time on taxpayers' backs. And see, all of this is meant to displace geothermal or any kind of renewable energy. These fake promises. The event was the first time we engaged in such a diverse group. Yeah, you've only been talking about it forever, and this is the first time you actually put a group together to talk about it. And what did they talk about? Jack shit. Each factory built nuclear power station, like, what they're talking about is never going to come to fruition. There's no factory. There is going to be no nuclear small modular reactors. And I showed you that earlier. Why? Because there's no nuclear renaissance. There's a renewable energy renaissance. And just last year, in a 12-month period, was almost 600 large nuclear reactors or renewables came online in 12 months. Double the 2022. Does anybody really think that's going to stop next year and the year after? Nuclear goes backwards each year with no new additions, no new capacity, and power 1 million homes for more than 60 years. So if you're not going to build a large reactor in a factory and will provide enough low-carbon electricity and create thousands of long-term. First off, they got to spend $100 million a year just on maintenance. Geothermal and renewables don't spend 1/100th of that. And so their so-called high-paying jobs are your enslavement jobs, your disease factory jobs. The worst thing ever created is nuclear by far. $3,000 per second, the global nuclear arms race. $3,000 every second. Billions invested in a nuclear Armageddon. You can't use nuclear weapons. That's the problem. So why are we wasting all our precious metals, all our precious resources, all of our labor, skilled laborers, on something we can't use? Like, it's proof that we're stupid, isn't it? It's proof that we're incompetent, right? One of China's current long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles, the Dongfeng 5, is capable of reaching the United States or Western Europe and delivering a payload of 5,000 kilotons, 333 Nagasaki bombs. Because that's not going to be a uranium weapon, that's a plutonium weapon. So why invoke Hiroshima, which is a uranium? Because that's the plutonium weapon they're talking about. And China knows they can't do that because they're going to get shot back, right? Just because they got it, don't mean they're going to use it. And if they use it, then they can't cash their checks anymore. So why would they use it? We're long past this idiot mode that the 1950s, 60s, and 70s generation of pro-nuclear communities were, right? These were the worst humans imaginable. And they understood they were going to poison the biosphere for 1 billion years, and they continue to do it because they never had nothing in their life. They never had an opportunity in their entire life. The nuclear industry gave them an opportunity, and all they had to do was hate everything and everybody, and they seized up on that. And their little fucking inbreeds are in positions of authority today. Those little degenerates, those little worms, those little maggots who run away like little children. If it reaches New York, one of the bombs would instantly kill 3 million civilians. Listen, we've heard this for, 80 years, this narrative? But it's not going to happen. If you release a biological weapon, you can wipe out 3/4 of the planet pretty quick because the transportation now is so vast. It's not going to happen, though. Because they won't have anything to have power over anymore. Right, their whole world is designed around their ability to have power. If they get rid of everything, they got no power. This new technology for nuclear power could help fuel an artificial intelligence revolution. Oh, transmutate. We've covered them a couple times. A Swiss startup, which is a mixed oxide. No, these are going to use the Hadron Collider to transmutate nuclear fuel. That's what they're saying, right? They don't know if it'll work. They got to build a couple of $25 billion experiments to see if it'll actually work. And where's the shithead himself too? This one right here. Look, that creature right there. That is a disgusting creature right there. He really is. I can guarantee you in real life. He's the CEO, believes. Because it's a lot of money in his pocket. Only nuclear power will be able to supply the massive energy demand in a reliable manner. Now he's talking about power in the data centers, right? Let me see, let me go backwards. They're talking about these data centers for Google. But see, there's another story. Now, the reason they're coming up with these stories is because geothermal threatens them, right? They said it can transmutate 99% of the world's high-level radioactive waste into new fuel, but we've covered this since their inception. And people like this are the reason the world will never have a future, because they exist. But let's go look at Houston's geothermal company that's grown a Google partnership to provide power to Nevada, if you really want to appreciate it. This little tiny facility will supply energy for 2 data centers in Nevada, 115 megawatts. So anything that small modular reactors can do, geothermal can do right away for 1/10 of the money. For the 2 data centers in Nevada, the same data type centers that Transmutate is talking about, and for Google's 2 data centers in Nevada are already up and running. Google spent $600 million instead of $600 billion to build each of the centers, which are in Henderson, the Las Vegas suburb, which is east of Reno. And 2 years later now, finally, the electricity from the project started flowing into the Nevada grid serving the 2 Google data centers. And you're talking about 115 megawatts in 2 years up and running geothermal. For the same kind of data centers that this prick right there, this useless fucking prick right there, this sadistic monster, this idiot, this transmutate wants to build for data centers. And he's 100 years away from coming to fruition, whereas geothermal is up and fucking running in 2 years. Nuclear is disgusting. pro-nuclear, despicable, sadistic cowards. That's all they are. They're just cowards. And you can take one look at this creature right there. Franken. And you know that's a coward, right? His entire legacy is predicated upon him being a coward. Just another coward like Ted, the monster from the Breakthrough Institute. Like the rest of them, these are cowards. Right? And there's legions of them. There's just endless. There's an endless fucking stream of these cowards. And they're so compartmentalized, that's why it works, right? Because they don't understand until it's too late that they are the worst things that can happen to a planet. Well, I wanted to get a 5th show out this week, and I did. And so back to your main question is, are all nuclear power plants surrounded by farms to poison you and kill you on purpose? Well, what other reason could there be? Really, like, what other reason could there be? When all the studies says that that's the stupidest thing you can do is surround your farms or build your nuclear plants in farmland, because the studies don't lie. Why are all nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? Really, though, why? Why do that? Why be that evil? Why be that sadistic when the evidence shows that the food is going to suck up the radiation? Because that's the best and quickest and simplest and most easiest way to poison you and your loved ones and your friends and your families. So when the show is over, in a few minutes, come back to the video and just let it play for a few minutes. Maybe I'll get an extra view. Because when the video is over, go to my front page and refresh it, and I might have 1 view or 2 views. And if you don't help me, then nobody will help me. Because you're the ones that found me. And that if you don't help me, what's the point? And how hard is it to come back to my video for a couple of minutes? And if you got to leave the house, put my video on and just let it play in the background. When you come back, turn it off. At least that way, we get a view and maybe people will find the video. But if you don't help me, you don't help the planet. That's the best way to help the planet, is just to try to get this video out there. And everybody should be emailing these videos out to anti-nuclear groups worldwide. Just look them up, find their email address, and start emailing them regularly. And you'll be surprised at the difference we can make in such a short period of time. Let's close down this terrifying poll, this nightmarish poll. Are nuclear power plants and nuclear dumps surrounded by farms to make us sick and kill us? And is by design? Yes, Dana. Unfortunately, that's exactly what's going on. Yeah, I know. Nobody was expecting to see me right now, but Google doesn't share me till long after I'm live. I had to get a show in because I couldn't do one last night. I explained it at the beginning of the show. And I remind everybody that we're bankrupt. I'm actually bankrupt at this stage. I was bankrupt 2 years ago, but now I'm officially bankrupted. And we can't afford to renew the site, nuclearproctologist.org. I got to raise over $400 because I incurred late fees now because I didn't renew it. And this is the 11th year of that site. And I just can't do it. I can't even pay my bills. I can pay my bills, but I can't afford to eat. But I still come here and I go to war every fucking day. I'm out there. I'll be out there this evening doing research because this is the opportunity. It's that time of year and we got no choice. Not because I'm healthy, Not because I am able to do it, not because it's not a burden, but because we got to do it. And I don't understand why the world lets the nuclear industry get away with what they're getting away with. For fuck's sakes, you got to support me, though. At least I'm out here trying to challenge this industry. I'm educating the population. I'm doing the work. I'm doing the research. But I have such little support. It's humiliating. And I'm as fucking honest as the day is long. Find somebody else that's more honest than me. Find anybody else that's more sincere than me. I dare you. That's doing the work. It's terrifying that there's nobody else out there is what I'm saying. It's just heartbreaking that nobody else is out there fighting for the planet. And I only got a couple of people at best supporting me, and we can't pay the expenses. And we can't get ahead. We can't get out and do the research that needs to be done. The links are in the bottom of the descriptions. There's 2 links to directly, one to my site that will probably disappear in the next couple of weeks, and the other one is to my PayPal. They're directly to me. And you can use credit cards on my site. Any credit card, that banking system, it's a massive banking system. It's basically used everywhere. And we've never had an issue. We've never had an issue with PayPal. We've never had an issue with credit cards on my website. And if I don't ask, then nobody will. Even if I ask, nobody's basically going to do it. But if I don't ask, we know nobody's going to do it. So I got no choice but to ask. And I'll continue to ask until we can't afford the internet no more, because we know that day is coming, right? Have a great day, a great night. We'll see everybody hopefully Sunday. I could be back tonight, I could be back tomorrow. You don't know with Dana. Have a great day, folks. Take care.